Warning: this video contains material that some may find disturbing. What has been the most heartbreaking thing you've personally witnessed? I work at a library. A man came in and one of our regular patrons, a teen who's probably 15 or 16, came running up to him and gave him a hug. Turns out, the man is the teen's father. Now, through 2 years of seeing this kid almost every day, I know a few things about him. He's in foster care, his mom OD'd last year, he grew up on the streets, and he was abused by several of his mom's boyfriends. I was surprised he had a dad, honestly. However, it became quickly apparent, to everyone else, that the dad wasn't that into seeing his son. But the boy could not see that. He was talking all about his life, his group home, his younger brothers, etc. Then the kid says, "Why don't we go to lunch? Let's go to Wendy's." The dad goes, "Sure, let me go get my wallet. I'll be right back." And he walks out the door and doesn't come back. At all. This kid stood in the middle of the library for like an hour, then went back and forth between the library and Wendy's for the rest of the day. A coworker and I ended up sitting in the parking lot with this kid for like 2 hours after we closed, just letting him cry. This is a teenager who has seen and experienced the very worst things, many of them probably at the hands of his father, and yet he wanted so desperately to be part of his dad's life. Spending a day in an orphanage in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. I was there when I was 17 in 2000, and again when I was 25 in 2008. So both were pre-earthquake. Both times I left in tears. At 17, I was trying to be a tough guy and not let it get to me, but walking into a room filled with kids who only want attention breaks you a little. Rows and rows of cribs with small children reaching out, all of them begging to be acknowledged. When you do spend time with them, their eyes light up. But when you have to leave, you feel like you are the most horrible person in the world. I sat in the hall and cried, completely unashamed. When I was 25, I took a group of kids aged 14 to 17, so I was trying to be tough for them. I handled it differently this time, as I was more coordinating what the kids were doing than anything. I still ended up in the hallway, absolutely crying my eyes out, hoping the kids wouldn't see and follow suit. But I will never forget being in those hot, stifling rooms. The looks on all those kids' faces. There are hundreds of kids and only one of you. Imagine when you were at a pet store as a kid and your parents make you put back that kitten, and you think, "I'm making this kitten sad." Now imagine doing it with a child, over and over again, for an entire day. It makes me cry just writing this. My husband and I lost a baby in December. I was so shocked by my own pain that I couldn't process the thought of other people outside myself. My husband made all the phone calls and took care of all the arrangements while I was essentially a zombie. One night, a few days later, he came home to find me sitting in the bathtub crying. He didn't say anything. He just reached out and held my hand. I don't know why, but I just stared at him and asked, "Why aren't you crying? Why don't you feel anything?" Up until that point, he had been my rock. He was all of my strength existing outside of my own body. The moment after I asked, he broke down in some of the most heartbreaking sobs that I have ever heard. He just kept shaking and sobbing, saying, "I loved our baby too, and this horrible thing is happening to you, and I can't fix it. I can't make it better." Seeing him break down like that was the one thing that brought me back to life. I was on a train to London, and across the aisle was a family. I was sketching away in my book, enjoying the ride, when I started picking up tidbits of their conversation. The two kids were with their dad, who was divorcing their mom. They were having a heartbreaking conversation about why, and I scribbled down so many nuggets from that conversation. Unfortunately, I lost that sketchbook a long time ago, but one thing will always stick with me. "Why?" the kid yelled at his dad. "Why are you breaking up?" "Because we don't love each other anymore." The kid, desperate, close to bawling, urgently grabs his dad's shirt and chokes out, "But you got married! If you got married, it means you have to love each other!" Man, big misty-eyed train ride there. Back in 1992, I was walking to a friend's place when suddenly there was a horrific car crash. I ran over to see a car had T-barred another at a roundabout. Canberra is full of them. It was about 1 a.m. and a few people came out to investigate. At this point, my St. John's training kicked in, and I told someone to go call an ambulance. The driver who rammed the other car smells like a brewery and is dead. He's also the driver who caused the accident by pushing through the roundabout. I get to the other car and there's a girl. She's pretty messed up. The steering column has punched her in the chest. There's blood everywhere, and there are no crumple zones, so her own car is smooshed against her. I tell her that I know first aid and that I'm not trying to grope her as a joke, while trying to figure out the extent of her injuries. I can feel all her ribs on her left side are fucked up, and even at the lightest touch, she's hurting. So I start talking to her, saying everything's all right. Well, it's not. But the ambulance is coming, and start making shitty jokes at her to keep her awake. Then I hear the ambulance in the distance and tell her she's gonna be all right. She looks me in the eye and says in a weak whisper, "Why didn't I meet you earlier?" and dies. Turns out, 30 seconds can be an eternity. I took my girlfriend to Cracker Barrel one morning, and we witnessed an elderly grandmother with her grandson eating. The little fucker had his earbuds in the entire time. The grandmother tried once or twice to talk to the little shit, but he kept ignoring her. She kept insisting, and with a huge sigh, he pulled out one earbud and said, "You're boring, I don't want to talk to you." The grandmother dejectedly ate the rest of her food in silence. I've never hit a kid before, but I would not have regretted popping him square in the nose one single bit. I've been in AA for 14 years. A few years ago, there was a meeting where the side topic was something like stuff we lost during a blackout. As you can imagine, there were some pretty amusing stories. One of them ended with, "And I never did find that car." And everybody had a good laugh. But then they called on this little mousy guy, a guy I'd never seen before. He said that one morning he woke up late for work and couldn't find his pickup for a while, but he finally found it in his backyard. Hungover and late for work, he hopped in and sped to work in an effort to make it on time. I think he worked at a lumber mill. He arrived, punched in, and started his shift. At lunchtime, he punched out and went to go eat lunch at his tailgate. As he walked to his truck, he noticed a dent in the grill. He went around to open the tailgate and noticed a dead and broken 9-year-old girl in the truck bed. He was sobbing as he explained that he only did 8 years in prison and ended by asking, "How does a guy make amends for something like that?" The room was completely silent. When I was a teacher, one of my first graders asked, "Do you have any kids?" After I said that I didn't, and I didn't even have a wife or a girlfriend, he said, "That's too bad. Do you know how I know you would be a good dad? You never hit me." God, I spent so many lunch hours crying in the staff bathroom at that job. My grandmother had a stroke about 15 years ago. She wasn't the same since. We would visit her at the hospice, and she was like a zombie. Sure, sometimes she would be somewhat lucid. She would recognize family members, and if my grandfather was there, she would sit and listen to everything he had to say, no matter the pain that she was in. But she couldn't walk, and talking was more or less just grunts while looking at pictures. Anyway, flash forward 4 years, and my grandfather gets a quick diagnosis of bone cancer. It was a death sentence, and a quick one at that. By the time he was in the hospital, he was given less than 3 weeks to live. We did what we could to get him into the same hospice as my grandmother, but they couldn't work fast enough, and he passed away within 10 days. Per my grandfather's wishes, my grandmother was never brought to see him in the hospital. My mother, aunts, and uncles held a private viewing just for my grandmother. She kind of knew what happened. She acknowledged to my mother that she knew he was dead, but she remained stoic on the ride to the funeral home. She was wheeled in and up to his casket, and suddenly it seemed to hit her. He was gone. For the first time in 4 years, my grandmother actually stood up and reached into his casket to kiss my grandfather. It was like the physical horrors that she suffered didn't happen. She held his hand for 10 minutes, crying, saying, "I love you. I miss you, and see you soon." It wasn't perfect when she said it, but you understood what she said, and that was incredible to us. After that, she calmly got back into her chair and asked to go home. She meant her real home, and we knew it, so we did. My uncle carried her up the stairs and put her to sleep in the bed that she shared with my grandfather for 46 years. The whole experience brings me to tears just thinking about it. And that concludes the most heart-wrenching tales shared on Reddit. If you want more incredible Reddit stories, give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, and click on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload. This is Reddit Story Hour. Stay curious, stay kind, and see you in the next video.